Welcome to Know God Deeply with Precept, where we discuss how to dig deeper into the Bible and discover God's truth for ourselves. Because when we know God more deeply through His Word, we live differently. Let's dig deep. Welcome to the Know God Deeply podcast. It's Adam here. Today I am joined by Rachel, David, and Corina. Happy New Year, y'all.
Hey.
It's a little too late for that.
Too late?
Yeah, come on.
Oh my goodness.
We're moving on.
All right. How
What
long
day is it?
into the new year do you say Happy New Year? Only 2 or 3 days? You got to get them all out early.
Yep. Got to move on.
I think most of the month of January, I'll still say.
In March, I
Okay.
still feel it's a Happy New Year. Yeah.
You get happy birthday a week after you turn something? Like, your birthday's really that day,
In an
right?
ideal world, yes.
But yeah, that's a birthday. This is a whole year. And
Oh,
we're still,
good point.
That's
Good point.
So,
That's
yeah, that's like stopping saying happy birthday at 8 a.m. because, well, you've already been for 8 hours now. You've already celebrated your birthday. I think it's time to stop saying it.
good point. I would say.
What I don't like is when people say Happy New Year's. That just gets all over me.
The plural.
And I think
Like
it's a little
possessive or a plural?
right. Yeah, because, New Year's Eve is possessive and even New Year's resolutions are possessive. And that's a little weird too, because maybe that's why we can't keep them, because it's the resolution of the new year and we're not taking enough ownership of it ourselves. I don't know. Things to think about. It's getting really deep. But speaking of New Year's resolutions, are you New Year's resolutions people? Do you have New Year's resolutions typically?
For the first week.
For the first week, it's kind of like, as long as you're saying Happy New Year, that's
Exactly.
how long you keep it.
I feel like I have more intentions. They're not SMART goals, like the measurable, none of that. I just kind of have like an intention for the year.
I like
it.
that. I do a
Yeah.
word of the year now. It's less pressure. So
Yeah.
Ooh, I like it.
What was this year's word?
it was depth.
Mm-hmm.
I could explain that and go more in depth because that would
More
be on brand.
in-depth.
But I don't know if
Yes,
you want all that
that's pretty deep.
information.
That's pretty deep. Yeah.
it is. I love it.
What about you, Adam?
Well, yeah, I'm kind of like you, Rachel. It's more of a general goal, something to kind of reach for, not necessarily a resolution. And we know, resolutions aren't necessarily bad, right? We know from our own experience that they're generally not too effective. They're hard to keep. And maybe we should stop calling them resolutions altogether and refer to them as wishes or goals or something different than resolutions. But we also know it to be true that life is filled with habits and routines, and these rhythms can shape our days, our weeks, our years, and even our sense of self. And so this season of the Know God Deeply podcast, we are discussing these rhythms, these sacred rhythms, which are biblical practices that allow us to grow spiritually and deepen our relationship with God. And so today we're going to be looking at 1 Kings, and we'll be in chapter 19, where we encounter Elijah, who is at this point a tired and discouraged prophet. And so we're going to look at 1 Kings 19, 1 through 8. Who would like to read for us today?
I can read for us.
Okay, great. Let's dig in.
It says, Ahab told Jezebel all that Elijah had done and how he had killed all the prophets with the sword. Then Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah, saying, So may the gods do to me and more also, if I do not make your life as the life of one of them by this time tomorrow. Then he was afraid, and he arose and ran for his life and came to Beersheba, which belongs to Judah, and left his servant there. But he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness and came and sat down under a broom tree. And he asked that he might die, saying, It is enough now, O Lord, take away my life, for I am no better than my fathers. And he lay down and slept under a broom tree. And behold, an angel touched him and said to him, Arise and eat. And he looked, and behold, there was at his head a cake baked on hot stones and a jar of water. And he ate and drank and lay down again. And the angel of the Lord came again a second time and touched him and said, Arise and eat, for the journey is too great for you. And he arose and ate and drank and went in the strength of that food 40 days and 40 nights to Horeb, to the mount of God.
So what was Elijah's request, and how did the Lord respond?
Well, I mean, we know Elijah's just been through a lot. In chapter 18, we saw him essentially orchestrate a showdown between the god Baal and the one true God, Yahweh, and God won. Yahweh won. And he's been kind of on this very high stakes journey, and then gets this message that Jezebel is out for his life. So he asks the Lord that he might die. And the Lord responds by sending an angel to give him a nap and a snack, as they say. And yeah.
I love the way you put that. You just need
I've seen that online somewhere, a nap and a snack. And it's very relatable.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of nuances we need to think about here. One of them is just the context of what's happened just before this. Is in chapter 18, they've had this incredible showdown, 450 prophets of Baal versus one prophet of Yahweh. And on top of Mount Carmel, it hasn't rained. God has shut down the heavens for years now, and there is this showdown. And he says to the people, look, if God is God, then follow God. If Baal's God, follow Baal. Let's see who really is God. And as Corina pointed out, the Yahweh won, and like won big time. Fire from heaven consumes this altar, and then he kills all 450 prophets. I mean, it's just like, one is a minimal take on it. And so when we get to verse 3, and he gets this message from Jezebel, it says in the ESV, then he was afraid. He arose and ran for his life. It just feels like, whoa, is this the same guy we're talking about? Has a ton of time gone by? And this word afraid can also be translated, if it's just got a slight difference in the word. It can either be yareh or yareh. Yareh is he was afraid. Yareh, he saw. And so it's very similar. And so scholars, go both ways with this. Some of them say he is scared for some reason, and so he's running for fear of his life. Whereas others say he's downright depressed. Like, oh my gosh, after this, we're still not, we won. We should be on top. What is going on? And so there's, either way, he is really upset. Either way, he is really down. And so he doesn't even want to live anymore. So it's not even like he's trying to protect his life in one sense. He is just done. And so he goes there, and God meets him in that time. And I don't know if y'all picked it up in verse 8. He goes after eating that food for 40 days and 40 nights. Now, I don't want to get weird, but when you see that time frame in the Bible, it's usually very significant. And he goes to a place called Horeb, which is known as the mountain of God. And if you go back to like Exodus 3:1 and go to the Deuteronomy passages in 28 to 30, you'll see Mount Horeb again. And it's a very significant place. And it reminds us of Moses. 40 days and 40 nights going up on Mount Sinai at the time. And then we also have the 40 years in the wilderness. So there's just a lot of going on in this text. So it's not just like, oh, here's a guy who's feeling a little depressed and, he's kind of bumming out. No, this is some serious stuff happening here. And I love, even more context, I love God has fed him with birds, bringing him, his food. Yeah. And you get this feel of like the manna that God rained down on the people. There's supernatural provisions going on. And so there's a lot in this story. But I just want us to feel the context, because I think where we're going with this is going to say, I need something. I need to hear from you, God,
Mhm.
in that. So, yeah, sorry to take over there, but
No, that's helpful, I think, seeing the different interpretations about his fear. I don't know Hebrew, but I do think that as the text goes on, it becomes clear that Elijah feels he has failed, right? He's going to go on, and not to spoil, but he's going to tell the Lord twice, I'm not better than my fathers. I'm not better than anyone who came before me. And I think he expected after that showdown for it to accomplish the purpose that he said it would, that God would turn the hearts of the people back to him. And so to complete that mission and then to make rain come down, right, through the power of the Lord, and then to get a message that this evil queen is still after you and is still in charge, and everything seems the same as it was before. I think he's got this enormous sense of failure. And I think that could introduce fear, right? When we're not thinking straight about ourselves or about God, we are more easily afraid. So maybe it's both. Just thinking out loud, but yeah, I think there's definitely a lot that we can take from this as we keep going.
yeah, that last phrase in verse 4, for I'm no better than my fathers.
Mhm.
That I think you're right on, Corina. That's at minimum. He feels like a failure.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I'm no better. Nothing's really changed.
Mm-hmm.
And you got to feel like, gosh, we just came off this incredible supernatural fire from heaven that just licked up all the water and tore it all up, and man, and it didn't work. It didn't take. Like, I'm still being hunted down by this Jezebel, and yeah, it's rough.
Let's go ahead and look at verses 9 through 18. And so we do hear the rest of the story.
All right, starting in verse 9. There he came to a cave and lodged in it. And behold, the word of the Lord came to him, and he said to him, What are you doing here, Elijah? And he said, I have been very jealous for the Lord, the God of hosts. For the people of Israel have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. And I, even I only, am left, and they seek my life to take it away. And he said, Go out and stand on the mount before the Lord. And behold, the Lord passed by, and a great strong wind tore the mountains and broke it in pieces and rocks before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, the sound of a low whisper. And when Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face in his cloak and went out and stood at the entrance of the cave. And behold, there came a voice to him and said, What are you doing here, Elijah? He said, I have been very jealous for the Lord, the God of hosts. For the people of Israel have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. And I, even I only, am left, and they seek my life to take it away. And the Lord said to him, Go, return on your way to the wilderness of Damascus, and when you arrive, you shall anoint Hazael to be king over Syria, and Jehu, the son of Nimshi, you shall anoint to be king over Israel, and Elisha, the son of Shaphat of Abel Maholah, you shall anoint to be the prophet in your place. And the one who escapes from the sword of Hazael shall Jehu put to death, and the one who escapes from the sword of Jehu shall Elijah put to death. Yet I will leave 7,000 in Israel, all the knees that have not bowed to Baal, and every mouth that has not kissed him.
All right. So what stands out about this section of chapter 19?
I think reading it out loud, it's you may not notice it as much when you're not reading it aloud, but reading it aloud, I notice the repetition. Like God asks this question, what are you doing here, Elijah? Elijah responds. Then there's this whole thing about the earthquake and fire and the low whisper. And then God asks the same exact question. He gives him the same exact response, but yet it's a different, that's when God kind of comes and gives him new purpose. So that was really interesting to me. Like, okay, what was different with his first response than his second? Because the words are exactly the same. So in my mind, I'm like, something changed in Elijah's heart or mind or spirit during that process with the fire and the earthquake and all that. Because the words were the same, but something's different here. So that really kind of stood out to me.
Yeah, if you look at verse 11, that seems to be the key difference between the two narratives. So how does God respond, basically? So 11 would be compared to verse 15. So those are the two responses of Yahweh to his statement of, look, it's just me. I'm by myself. It's only me. The first one is this really interesting experience, supernatural experience with God, where it feels to me like Moses. I mean, I keep going back to Moses, but it feels like Moses being put in the cleft of the rock and God's glory passing by. And so he's got him, I want you to stand here and I'm going to pass by, he says, and there's going to be a wind, a great wind that is tearing things up. Pieces of the mountain's going to be broken to pieces and rocks are come out before the Lord. So there's this, you remember when Moses went up and it says the glory of the Lord sat down on top of the mountain and it shook. The creation reacted to the presence of the Creator. Like it just, and it scared the people so bad. They said, please, this is back in Exodus, don't let him do that again because we will die. I mean, you can imagine how terrifying that must have been. And so you've got a very similar, much smaller scale, but you have a similar thing happening here in verse 11. So you've got this God's showing himself. And I don't know about you, but I would think it would be in the loud, in the profound, in the dramatic, where God would speak. And yet that doesn't seem to be, it doesn't end there. I mean, we have a couple of rounds and it ends with a whisper.
I found that interesting. I love hearing you describe it, and you're helping us visualize it with even the way you're describing it. But back in chapter 18, I noticed just in reading it to get some context that there is a repeated word of voice. And so even though Elijah in chapter 18 he sets up the showdown like this, he says the one who answers by fire, then he is truly God. And we do, of course, see God answer with fire. But when the prophets of Baal are cutting themselves and chanting and dancing around for hours and hours and hours to get a response from their God, it says twice in verse 26 and in verse 29, there was no voice and no one answered. And the next time we see that word voice is in chapter 19, in this account that we're talking about, where it says, there came a voice to him. And so to me, it just was a picture of, yes, God does specialize in the miraculous. God does work through incredible supernatural displays of power. But he is also an intimate God. He's a personal God. He's a relational God. So the god Baal wasn't capable of either supernatural works or speaking. But God can do both. And it's almost like in showing Elijah the earthquake and then showing Elijah the wind, he is reminding him, yes, I can do all of this, but I'm also present with you in a more ordinary way, in just a conversation, in relationship. And that doesn't always look so spectacular.
Yeah, that's really interesting hearing that context from the previous verse, the word voice. That's really interesting. And when I was thinking about this, because even in this passage in chapter 19, we see that Elijah has heard from God, like he's talking with God. So it's not like he hadn't heard from God in a while, And no, like he had been in communication with him, but there was something that needed to happen in Elijah's heart to recenter him, remind him, whatever, we don't know, whatever that is, something he needed to be transformed in some way. And God used a gentle whisper. I think some translations even translate that phrase to a sheer silence, There was something that, and if you think about what Elijah had been doing with calling down fire from heaven, killing, all these people, like Elijah needed that moment of whether it was peace or whatever, we don't know what was, how he transformed in that moment. But clearly, he had been hearing from God, but yet it's a reminder that just because God has been talking to you one way doesn't mean he won't speak to you in another way. And because he knows what we need in those moments. He knows what's in our hearts.
Yes.
So.
Yeah, and that you saying, he knows what we need, and you see that in his care for Elijah, both in these verses and in the previous verses that we read, where the first thing he does is not ask questions of Elijah. It's here, have food, get rest. And it just is, approached so gently, through the angel that the Lord sends. And he says, you need this strength, you need this energy, because the road ahead is hard, it's long. And so there's just this real responsive care to what Elijah is going through. And I think we see it too in this scene on the mountain where he's asking Elijah questions that, to me, doesn't seem like it's coming from a place of judgment at all. But it's not that God doesn't know what Elijah is going through, right? That's not why he's asking the question. He's asking the question to get Elijah to the place where he can understand. And
yeah. What are you doing here?
Right.
You could read that. You could read that and say, "Oh, he is upset with him." But I don't think that. I think you're right. I think he's doing it without judgment. And even when he says twice, "I'm by myself. Look, I'm the only one really following you, Yahweh. Everybody else has broken your covenant, has abandoned you." And yet the whole dialogue ends in verse 18 with God saying, "I've got a remnant, and they've not left me. They've not broken my covenant. They've not kissed Baal. They have not bowed a knee. I'm still here. I still got it. You need to trust me. You need to be dependent upon me for the mission that I've called you to do." So, yeah, I think you're right, Adam. It's not this, gosh, why are you scared? He doesn't say that. He doesn't say, "Why are you scared?" He just says, "What are you doing? What are you doing here?"
Me to
And
my
both
son
times he's like, yeah.
when he's eating Play-Doh. What are you doing? Yeah.
Nothing.
Yeah. I love sweet Elijah. I just adore him. I love that you mentioned that, David, because there's 7,000 people who have not kissed Baal, who have not bowed to Baal. But also in the previous chapter, you went and you spoke to Obadiah, who's a prophet, who told you he hid 100 prophets in caves.
Right.
You're not the only one, Elijah.
Yeah.
You feel like you are, right? Poor thing, but you're not the only one. And I so relate to that. And so I do think God's giving him space to search his own heart and rethink about what he's saying.
Yeah. Yeah, circumstances really can kind of either cloud our judgment or at least, shade our understanding in some ways. And we see that, God kind of pulling back the veil there and helping him to understand. So when we're thinking about this experience, what does this mountaintop experience with Elijah and God teach us about stillness and hearing from God?
Yeah, thanks for bringing us back to our whole point here. You're right. It is. There is a communication from God to Elijah that is quiet, that is still. And I don't know about y'all, but I'm wired for action and reaction and interaction, and love the dialogue and the wrestling. And yet there is the way God wants to talk is very quiet. So there is a sense in which he's saying, like the psalmist, "Be still and know that I am the Lord."
It's really interesting to see how this stillness, this quietness, this silence is not the only way God speaks. We've seen throughout Elijah's experience that God clearly speaks in the fires and the earthquakes. But there does seem to be something special here, something transformative in the stillness, in this silence, in this quiet moments with God, something that truly transforms our hearts like it did for Elijah here. And while the powerful and the mighty and all that can strengthen our faith and, do really amazing things for the witness of God and stuff, there's something really beautiful about when we do have a rhythm of like quietness and stillness with God. I do, at least in my own experience, I feel like that's when transformation often happens in my own life. And so, just kind of leaning into that stillness can be really transformational for sure.
Yeah. I love what you said about how transformational it is, because I think Elijah, he's an exception to the rule. And obviously, everybody has their unique relationship with God and their journey with God. But you see him step onto the scene and he just withholds the rain. Like, hey, I'm Elijah, no more rain. That's kind of how his story starts. And we know from James that that's what he becomes known for too, among Christians and even Jewish believers is, he's the guy who had such a relationship with God, such a powerful prayer life that he just withheld the rain. And then we see him with these prophets of Baal. And so there's these big moments for him. But something that stuck out to me in 19 is in verse 4, it says, he went and he sat down under a broom tree and he asked that he might die. And as I'm reading that, I'm going, he asked who? But he's just with the Lord. He does have this constant companion in the Lord. And so it just says he asked that he might die. And he's just talking to God, who shows up, through an angel and comforts him and encourages him and leads him on. But I think I have that temptation to just desire those big moments and those undeniable moments where it's hard to miss a rock, falling into pieces around you. Like you said, David, it's hard to miss the fact that you just slayed all of those prophets. But Elijah, I think, needed a reminder to rely on that quiet, still, constant habit of just being in the Lord's presence. He didn't have to say, hey, God, are you there? Like he just, hey, can I die now? He knew God was there. And then he had that kind of constant companionship. And I just love that.
Yeah. And it's important also to remember just some of the geography and time that's represented here. So Beersheba, not really sure why that was the destination, but it's about 200 miles. He's got 40 days and 40 nights. It wouldn't take you 40 days to walk 200 miles. But you've got this period in this chapter that's kind of drawn out. And I think sometimes we want microwave relationship with God. I type in the code, hit enter or hit go, and it solves it quickly. And I think there's this journey, this patience, this quietness, and it's a rhythm, right? It's I need to just unplug. I need to listen. I need to wait. Oh, that's so hard for me. I need to be patient. I need to exercise dependence upon the Lord and kind of hold it, my hands open and saying, you put it there when you're ready. I'm waiting. I'm waiting for you in that. So I think we kind of have that aspect of stillness kind of comes through. It reminds me of just kind of the whole cadence from creation of, 6 days and then the seventh day, stop, cease, Shabbat. The word it means to cease, right? And there's this, it's not as if God was tired and needed a rest, right? We don't think he's got limitations at all, but we do. And so he wants us to pick up that rest. He wants us to pick up that pattern. And I think, man, if anything is being neglected today in our culture, stillness is one that just is not there. I mean, there's something always trying to get my attention. It's in my hand, right? Or it's on my watch. I don't have one, but so it's on your wrist. It's on your TV. It's everywhere. There's always noise and activity and action and going. And I think sometimes God brings transformation through stillness. Like you said, Rachel, I think there's like a shh, shh, listen. And it's that low whisper that comes through. So what a contrast too, right? Of like Corina, like you pointed out, just what he had experienced over the past, I don't know, a couple days, weeks, and wow. He's he had to be on high, especially when he saw that cloud coming and then the rain, right? And the torrential rain, and he's slaughtered all these guys. You thought, man, and then he goes from that to, I want to die,
right,
sitting under a little tree. Give me death. Wow. What a contrast.
Yeah. And, Elijah just kind of bursts onto the scene in First Kings just a couple of chapters before this. And so we don't see, it's just like, oh, we don't know anything about him, but here he is just proclaiming the words of God in a powerful way and God working miraculously through him. And so this is the first time we see, oh, this feels like a setback. This feels like he's confused, and he goes all the way to the extreme of, I'm done.
Right.
If it's almost like if it's not going to happen this way, like it's been happening, I don't understand it. and I don't know what you're doing, God. And so it's helpful for us to see him, I think, wrestle with that and be shown that God can work in the big, loud, great things, but also in the still and the quiet. And so, and we've, David maybe has answered it already in what you just said about how life can be filled with so much activity. So why can embracing a rhythm of stillness be so hard for us? I feel like that's part of the answer there, just all the activity that's going on, but what else maybe, or elaborate on that?
I definitely agree with David, the busyness for sure, and just like the distractions, social media, schedules. I think for me, I'm just going to be honest, I can read this passage and I can learn so much about stillness and quiet moments with the Lord and how it's transformational from Elijah's experience. When it comes down to applying that to my life, I think I have doubt that it will happen. That if I spend the time in silence and in stillness, I'm just going to feel like I'm wasting my time. And so I think doubt for me is a big one. I don't know. If anybody else can relate to that.
I so can. Yeah. I think, and we see that with Elijah. Elijah is results driven. Yeah. Right? He was looking for a certain result. He promised the people a certain result. God is going to turn your hearts back to come to this broom tree and realize that nothing is changing. He didn't have a framework for that. And I think that's my issue too, is if I sit down and I take this time, what if nothing happens? Is the question that kind of looms sometimes in the back of your head, is what if God doesn't show up? What if I don't understand it? What if I don't feel different? And I think that's where Elijah is a good example of realizing and remembering that we can't control God. I think that's something God was showing him, is we can't make him act a certain way. Even if we know what our mission is and our call is, we can't make it happen the way we want it to. And that's okay. Like, we have hopefully friends that we sit down with and we know, like, if I walk away from this conversation, I'm going to feel a certain way. I'm going to have gotten this certain result. God is not that kind of friend. We can sit down and it can be hard to discern his voice. It can be quiet, like this passage shows us. He can say something we don't like. He can keep us in a place for a while that we feel ready to move on from. Like, he asks Elijah twice, and Elijah's answer is the same twice. And I think of walking into church with my son, how slow we walk. And it's like, we're not walking slow because I need to walk slow. We're walking slow because he needs to walk slow. And sometimes I think, nothing's happening. And it's God's trying to show us something about ourselves. Like, there is an opportunity for, I love that word that keeps coming up, transformation in that nothingness, in that still moment, in that silence. So all of that to say, yes, I 100% relate to that, Rachel. Yeah.
It's interesting when you were talking, I was thinking about how he's such a results-driven people, and we are too. And I think that's why we gravitate so heavily towards the spiritual disciplines of activity, reading our Bible, serving in church, and all those. Obviously, we should be doing those things, but we can grasp the results of those. We have more knowledge. We helped this specific person, but just sitting there in silence or stillness or quietness, like you said, doesn't always result in the way we want it to, in the way we expect it to. And I was thinking about, even if God doesn't, quote, show up in the way we expected, maybe the lesson is a lesson of humility, of like, I can control how much Bible I'm learning. I can control how much I'm serving. But in this moment of stillness, I have no control over what's going to happen. And even that in and of itself is a lesson of humility and trust.
There's a synagogue, an ancient synagogue in the Galilee area that we used to go see. And the steps leading up to it are not the same height and depth. They vary. And so it was explained to us, the archaeologists believe that they would intentionally make steps different. I don't know if you know this, but there's like a code for steps in America. The step has to be this high and this deep. And it's because your brain just knows that's how you do it. And when you get that, man, you can go up steps really fast. But if they're not, you have to slow down. You got to look down. You got to pick your steps carefully to go in. And so there was this sense that they didn't want people to rush in to worship. They didn't want to rush into the synagogue. They wanted them to slow down and get some reverence, some perspective. And I think that's, to me, that's one of the aspects of this text is God is with stillness. God is saying, I want your attention. I want your focus. And I want you to listen. I want you to stop and wait on me. And not that God's slow, right? It's not that at all. But there's a lesson being taught here. And I think you're walking your son into church is a perfect example of those little legs need to walk on their own. That's part of it. You could carry them and get in there a whole lot faster, but there's something about that process. And there's same way with God. There's something about the process of times of just saying, you know what? I am going to just be quiet. And I don't know if y'all have done this in your prayer life, but sometimes in your prayer life, let me just challenge you, if you haven't tried this lately, just start off with, hey, I'm listening, and just be quiet. You're not going to have an earthquake. You're not going to, maybe, who knows? You're not going to have, right, this profound, Damascus Road light experience, but you might hear from him in a way that you're not expecting. If anything, you're saying this conversation is really important, and it needs to start with you, Lord, not with me. And so I'm just going to start by listening and being quiet. If anything, it kind of recalibrates your mind and your attention to, hey, this is not something rote. This is not a superstitious thing I'm doing. This prayer, this is a conversation with the Creator, the Almighty. Let me start off by being quiet and listening and being still. And I think that's kind of the feel I get from this interaction here with Elijah.
Yeah, that's great. And I love that intentionality. And speaking of baby steps or small steps, any other practical ways that we can incorporate this type of rest and intentionality with the Lord during the moments of our days?
I don't want to sound like a parent, but I am. Of course, my kids are all adults now. But I think if the first thing you do when you wake up is look at your phone and get into your feed, your news feed, or whatever, your sports feed, or whatever your information coming in, if that's the first thing you do, your day is going to follow that pattern. But I think if you say, you know what, the phone doesn't even get turned on until I've had time to talk with God and to spend time with him. You don't have to be legalistic about it. But I will tell you, there are, and I've been doing this for years, but there are still days when I'm like, I just want to check the weather. I just want to know just real quick.
Yep.
And you know what it is. As soon as you hit that weather app, then here comes this advertisement, and it's got an algorithm that knows you, what you want. Next thing you know, you're pulled away and you're looking at something, So I think that's a practical way is don't start your day any other way than before you talk to God. And coffee, of course. That's spiritual.
That's so good, because I just recently, and I think I mentioned on a previous podcast episode about that temptation of picking the phone up the first thing. So I just recently started charging my phone in another room, not my bedroom.
Smart.
It's like I have an alarm clock now, not using my phone as the alarm. Remember those? Yeah. And so it's like, I don't need this right here. And put it somewhere where it's not the first thing. And so, and it's amazing how a small change like that can make a huge difference. But what else? Any other practical daily things we can do?
I think for me, I'm somebody who usually finds rest in activity, like a mindless activity. But I like reading this passage, and probably over the past 6 months or so, I've been trying to challenge myself to truly be still. And something that helps me is to get outside in nature, usually just my backyard, because I just love being outside so much, and just focusing my gaze on one thing, a flower, a tree, and just focusing my gaze on that. And then, the thoughts that come, wherever the Holy Spirit takes me in that moment. But I feel like that helps me. And sometimes it's like 2 minutes, sometimes it doesn't have to be very long, but I feel like getting outside and then focusing my gaze on something of nature, which is purely made by God, really helps me and find kind of stillful. I don't think that's the word, but moments of stillness
I like it.
in my day. I'll just try to do that like once or twice a day. Yeah.
That's good. I'm always in the backyard now. My siblings think it's funny. I do not like the outdoors, but my son likes the outdoors. Yeah, I have noticed that. I wasn't going to say that as my practical step, but I think I could second that. Is I have noticed that forced exposure to nature that I have several times a day with my son is like, man, I'm thinking about growth when I'm looking at this tree, and that makes me think about this scripture, or maybe the Lord is showing me this or that. I think that's great advice.
Well, and the backyard's a good kind of controlled outdoor experience for the most part, especially if you have a fence or something like that. So it's baby steps, right?
They all hike.
Right. Who knows where you'll be this time next year. So let's go to our so what. What's our big kind of personal takeaway from studying 1 Kings 19? So I'll go first. Often we hear about people admonishing us, don't put God in a box. God is so big. He's huge. He can do anything. But I think in this experience that Elijah has, he needed to learn the opposite. He needed to learn that God was also in the small things. And so he was, in a way, putting God in a box of like, God does these big things. This is how he always reacts. And so when we look at the context, we were talking about chapter 18 quite a bit. And the last verse of chapter 18, Elijah thinks, okay, this experience on Mount Carmel, it's going to do it. Everybody's going to change. Everybody's going to come back to the Lord. And he was so excited about it. In verse 46 of chapter 18, he says, the word says, and the hand of the Lord was on Elijah, and he gathered up his garment, and he ran before Ahab to the entrance of Jezreel. Ahab had already gone to Jezreel. Mm-hmm. Elijah's outrunning him to Jezreel because he's like, they're going to change, or the circumstances are going to change. God has done this big thing, and then it doesn't. The next thing we know, he's running for his life and wanting to die. And so my big takeaway, my so what, is I don't want to limit God in either direction. So he's the God of the big things. He's the God of the small things. One of the memes that have gone around in the past few years that gets on my nerves so much is this picture of Jesus with a little girl, and the little girl's got a teddy bear, and Jesus is asking the girl to give up the teddy bear because he has a bigger teddy bear behind him. And it drives me crazy because it's not always the bigger thing that God is offering us, but it's always the better thing that he's offering us. And so that's my so what.
That is so good, Adam. I love that meme.
That is. I was thinking,
good perspective.
And I was thinking the same thing of that seeing God, and it's real easy to say, I don't put him in a box. It's real hard to live that way, though. And I was thinking about Paul in the opening of his second letter to the church of Corinth. He says in verse 8 of chapter 1, he goes, I don't want you to be unaware, brothers, of the affliction we experienced in Asia. Listen to how he describes this affliction. For we were so utterly burdened beyond our strength that we despaired of life itself. Indeed, we felt that we had received the sentence of death. So I bet Paul and Elijah are probably hanging out somewhere in heaven and talking about what they went through. They sound very similar in this situation. But Paul tells us in verse 9, or the Holy Spirit through Paul tells us why. He says that was to make us rely not on ourselves, but on God who raises the dead. For me, my takeaway is that when I'm still before the Lord, no matter what's going on in my life, I can rest, I can trust, I can cease because I know I'm dependent upon him, and he is dependable. He is worthy of my trust and my leaning into him. And so I think my takeaway from this is, don't put him in a box, even when you really want to, God, you owe me this. I've done this, I've not done this. And therefore that adds up. I've typed in the code in the ATM of heaven and you owe me some money, That's sometimes how I act with God versus I need to just be still before him and wait and rely and trust and lean on him. Put all my eggs in his basket, in other words, in doing that. So that would be a takeaway for me.
Yeah, Adam, I think, I'm going to have to think about what you said a lot. It's different words for something that has kept me returning to this passage for many years now. But yeah, I think of Naaman when he's looking for healing and they tell him, okay, I'm not even going to come out to see you. Just go wash in the Jordan 7 times. And he's mad about that. He expected a great reception. He expected somebody to, wave their hand around, just look at him at least. And his servant is the one who says, okay, if he had told you to do this great thing, wouldn't you have done it? So why don't you go? And I think I'm guilty of that with my relationship with the Lord is, okay, I'll do anything. But if that thing is doing dishes again, if that thing is serving one of my family members again, right? Or like Elijah sitting in the cave and waiting for the sound of silence again, then I'm not as interested in that. Not to mention the fact that we can't control the person who's on the other side of that silence and being okay with that, being okay with how the Lord works, whether that's the results that we're hoping for or not. Elijah wasn't responsible for the response of the people of Israel. He was just responsible for his faithfulness. And yeah, that's a big takeaway for me always.
So good.
Mine's kind of similar. My takeaway was kind of like just remembering that transformation and growth doesn't only happen in activity. But I might change mine to something Corina said earlier. My takeaway might be when I am whatever, fill in the blank, when I'm depressed, when I'm sad, when I'm fearful or angry or confused, instead of trying to fix it right away, I'm going to eat a snack, take a nap, and have a few moments of stillness before the Lord. I think that's my takeaway. It's a 3-step plan that I think would probably do me really well.
I love it.
Works for my toddler.
I love it.
Works for me.
Yeah, I mean, even biologically, it works for you, right? You need rest. You need some blood sugar going on, right? I mean,
yes.
Yeah.
I love it. This has been a great conversation. Listeners, we would love to hear from you if you have experienced rhythms of stillness that can quiet your mind and restore your soul and help you to hear from God. So reach out to us on our socials at precept.usa, and we'll be right back with our Take It or Leave It.
The Bible is a treasure trove of truth that can lead you into a deep relationship with God Himself. But how can you really dig in and discover that truth? Find step-by-step instructions on inductive Bible study in our How to Study Your Bible, a classic resource with over 1 million copies in print. You'll get equipped with practical skills to discover the truth of God's Word for yourself, because knowing God's Word means you'll know Him more deeply, and that will change your life. Get your copy of How to Study Your Bible today at precept.org.
All right, we are back with Take It or Leave It, and it is I was about to say duty, but it is my privilege to give you a Take It or Leave It topic. The item, it is cilantro. Take it or leave it. People seem to have very strong opinions one way or the other. So, Rachel, cilantro. Take it or leave it.
I was not expecting you to say cilantro, but I'm going to take it. I love cilantro. It does not taste like soap to me. I put a ton of it in my guac. Take it for sure.
So do I. Exactly. Lots of cilantro makes good guac.
Okay. David?
Well, that helps me because I didn't know what it was until you said that. So that's that green leafy stuff and they put in the guac. Okay, yes, I love it. Yeah, I'll take it.
I am also going to take it. Love it. Give me a good street taco just covered in it. It is so good. Sorry to all the folks that it tastes like soap for some reason. Hopefully in heaven, you'll be able to taste the glory of cilantro like we all do. That is not biblical at all, but we can hope. All right. This has been fun. Wonderful conversation. We will see you all next time as we continue to talk about sacred rhythms. Bye-bye, y'all.
Thank you for listening to Know God Deeply from Precept, a nonprofit Bible study ministry. For over 50 years, Precept has equipped people just like you in nearly 190 countries to discover the truth of Scripture for themselves. You can get to know God more deeply through Precept's inductive Bible study resources. And when you know God more deeply, you'll live differently. To discover more about Precept and check out our resources, visit precept.org.